At 7 o'clock, we'll go ahead and welcome everyone to the November 13th Albany Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. We will call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 2, roll call.
Yes, Commissioner Donaldson.
Here.
Commissioner Kent.
Here.
Commissioner Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner McLeod.
Here.
Chair Waddy.
Here. All right, item 3 on our agenda, ex parte communications. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose?
None.
Nope. Nope. Great. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4 on our agenda. That's the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted on by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the commission. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the audience or the commission requests removal from the consent calendar. First up, we have item 4-1, the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from October 23rd. Item 4-2, Planning Application 19-053. This is a design review for a single-story addition and facade modifications at 1049 to 51 Solano Avenue. Is there anyone who wishes to pull either of these items off? Great. And before we make a motion, I will have to recuse myself from the meeting minutes since I wasn't at the last meeting. But with that, do we have a motion?
Okay. With that, I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, those motions pass unanimously. Moving on to item 5, this is general public comment. This is public comment for members of the public wishing to address the commission on an item that is not otherwise on the agenda. Please note that each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any folks here who would like to speak on an item that's not otherwise on the agenda? Right. Seeing none, we will close general public comment and move on to the regular items on the calendar. First up, we have item 6-1. This is an item that was continued from October 23rd. It's an amendment to Chapter 20.24 Development Standards of the Municipal Code regarding electric development standards for new construction.
There we go. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Bond, the Community Development Director for the city. This is a continuation of the Commission's discussion from a few weeks ago, in light of the fact that several of you weren't there, and there may be members of the public that weren't there as well. It's going to be a little bit repetitive from the previous presentation with a few new pieces of information. The action that we're asking for you this evening is to prepare a recommendation to the City Council. What we've drafted is an ordinance that would establish requirements that all new construction, all new buildings have all electric construction. In other words, no natural gas appliances. To briefly summarize, I believe the minutes, you've had an opportunity to review the minutes of the meeting, but to just briefly summarize, at the last commission meeting, there was a substantive discussion, there was a request for additional analysis, and some refinements suggested to the findings in the text of the ordinance, and we've tried to make those changes. And big picture, what we're trying to do is an important step towards achieving the city's climate action goals. In the staff report, those are enumerated, and in summary, reducing greenhouse gases generated within the city by 60% by 2035. And currently in our general plan, we have a goal of net zero emissions by the year 2050. As a part of achieving that, about 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions in Albany presently are result from natural gas in buildings. So this is an important place to focus in on. And there's a lot going on in this area right now. There is increasingly available alternatives to gas appliances that have traditionally been powered by natural gas. And also a lot of cities are developing policies in this. We're trying to stay on top of that, but it's a very active policy area right now in the Bay Area. Again, this is a little bit repetitive of some of the earlier presentations, but just to refresh your memory, there are kind of two, in a broad sense, two phases to the city's review of a development application. The first is the planning review. The commission takes the lead on nearly all of that, certainly in the major projects. Your regulations are embedded in Chapter 20 of the Municipal Code, and that's where this draft ordinance is proposed to reside. The second stage is a staff-level building permit review process where we take a look at the project that you've approved and make sure it complies with the state building code. This is completely ministerial, and the city's ability to modify the state building code, and particularly in this area, is limited. And there's a process we have to go through, in particular, changes to the California Energy Code, which is an element of the building code, does require the California Energy Commission review and approval, and they have a methodology in place that is not easy in order to accomplish what a lot of people would like to see. So what we're proposing is to have as a condition of approval, basically a regulation that allows us to impose a condition of approval that for construction of a new building, no natural gas appliances would be allowed, and we would characterize this as an objective design standard, which is a relatively new term in the planning world, but it's a result of recent changes in state law, particularly SB 35, which passed a couple of years ago, I guess now, and SB 30, which will become effective on January 1st, which really limit the city's ability, your commission's ability to make subjective design decisions. And so we have to be much more cognizant of making design standards that are objective in nature. I think there's some other advantages of this. Again, we're not dealing with the complexity of the building code. We're focusing our requirements specific to Albany regulations. We don't have to go through the California Energy Commission process, which involves feasibility studies and using their methodology and their modeling assumptions. And it's essentially patterned, although not word for word, in concept, is patterned very closely off what the city of Berkeley did earlier this summer in approving an ordinance that essentially does the same thing. And in that case, the PG&E wrote a letter and has been writing letters to other cities in support of ordinances like this. And I've been at presentations where members of the staff of the California Energy Commission say that they thought this was a good approach, rather than to try to work through the Energy Commission and their statutory framework, which, as I've mentioned, is kind of a little bit harder to navigate. Again, kind of being a little bit repetitive here, but wanting to make sure that it's clear that even for projects that are subject to these new state laws and streamlined review, such as SB 35 and SB 330, they're not getting, we want to draft this ordinance in a way that they're not excused from meeting this requirement. So we specifically defined it as a objective design standard. And I should mention, as with any ordinance that we do, we always like to include a hardship and an exemption process, just in case it's kind of a safety valve. If there's something unique about a particular situation, that there's a process available for people to request an exception to that. And that's detailed in the ordinance. And in summary, that request comes to you in a public meeting where you get to evaluate that and make a recommendation to whoever has the authority for the final decision of the project. To summarize again, the ordinance, it's really the key phrase is highlighted in bold on this slide. It's natural gas infrastructure shall be prohibited in newly constructed buildings. That's the heart of this. As we've drafted it, will become effective 30 days after the ordinance is approved by the city council and posted by the city clerk. There's a little bit of flexibility for that. If in the city of Berkeley, as an example, made the effective date, I think 6 months after their approval, just to give people who might be in the design process a little bit of a lead time. We don't believe that's necessary in this case, but it's an option available to you. And we'll also touch briefly on ADUs. As with the city of Berkeley, Berkeley's ordinance exempted accessory dwelling units. We're recommending that as well. And I think originally the city of Berkeley's intention with this and ours as staff was we're trying to help facilitate the development of ADUs as much as possible, manage to keep development regulations as low as possible so that people will go for this. What we're learning just in the last couple of weeks and starting to study new state laws that become effective January 1st, ADU regulations in the state are really going to be turned upside down, I guess, is maybe the best way to put it. And our ADU regulations, for example, will be essentially null and void. And we'll need to comply with state law. We'll need to prepare a new ordinance. And under this new bill, SB 63, I believe it was, 63 or 68? 68. We'll need to get the State Housing Community Development Department's approval of our new ordinance, and they'll review that to make sure it complies with the intent of the state legislature. Again, I think I covered this, so I'll just kind of keep on going. That in the event there is an exemption that is granted by the commission, the code still would require the construction to be include capacity in order that it can be easily converted to electric in the future. The Climate Action Committee has reviewed this at one of their recent meetings in October and endorsed the ordinance and recommending to the City Council adoption of this draft ordinance. I wanted to touch on the Berkeley requirements. Again, like us, their focus was on the planning phase of the project and not the building permit phase, and this gets really blurry sometimes. So these are quotes that were taken out of the ordinance. They're basically saying any project that requires a use permit or a zoning certificate, which I believe is most of their projects. They're not considering this as an amendment to the California Energy Code. And like us, we would seek to have these requirements incorporated as a condition of approval, of a planning approval. This is an ordinance that is moving fairly quickly by the rate of most ordinances, but this is an important issue that is a hot issue in the planning community, and we wanted to keep up with it. This would be your third discussion. You first approved a resolution of necessity at the first meeting in October. You had a substantive discussion at your second meeting, and following tonight's meeting, if you take an action, we would see taking it to the City Council probably in December sometime. I think there will probably be some questions about accessory dwelling units this evening, so I want to touch a little bit more on that and just reiterate that accessory dwelling units are really a different thing, and even more so become effective in January 1st. First of all, it's a ministerial action. It never comes to the commission. It's something that under state law, city staff have to review and approve. There's no public notices. This new bill, AB 68, as I mentioned, really shakes it up. It tears up a lot of the setbacks and lot coverage and other kinds of standard zoning regulations that we would normally apply to an ADU. Those are out the window. Parking requirements as well. It will, I think, greatly facilitate even more ADU applications over the next few years. I mentioned that the State Housing and Community Development Department, HCD, will need to review these amendments to our regulations. We don't know. We can research to see if we can, what HCD would consider, if they would consider an all-electric requirement a barrier to ADU development or not. We would certainly seek to pursue that, but we just haven't had an opportunity to do that. In the interim, it is, as I mentioned last time, it's our intent to promote electrification with applicants as we're helping them submit their application and consider the design of their project. And Chris usually interacts with them on an extensive basis, and this would just be one more thing that we would encourage them to take a careful look at. We're hoping that it makes sense for people to do that because of the lower cost of a lot of these electric appliances these days. So it may be an issue that doesn't need a regulation, ideally. And then finally, to wrap it up, as I mentioned, if you were to take action tonight, we would bring the ordinance to the City Council probably in December. Kind of depends on their workload, and if there are other things that we feel like we should do before we take it to the council. In the meantime, we will continue to develop and put online some information about the advantages and considerations in electrifying new construction in the city. So with that, there are several people here with city staff who will be happy to answer any of your questions.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
If I may, I just wanted to touch on ADUs again. So all our local objective planning standards would not apply to ADUs in any case, and they're all being thrown out the window, basically. That would include setbacks and
Yes.
everything like that.
That's exactly.
Those are objective planning standards.
They're all gone on
They're gone.
Even the
January 1.
beginning January 1st, if you look in their ADU section of Chapter 20 of the Planning Code, there's a half a dozen different development standards to apply just to them.
Yeah, so this zoning planning level, what we adopt or recommend to be adopted would be an objective planning standard, but would not apply at all to ADUs.
And what we're going to have to bring back to you is a brand-new comprehensive ADU ordinance that complies with this new bill. And that will happen pretty early on, hopefully early on in 2020. And by then we'll try to find out how HCD would react to an all-electric requirement. And then there's a policy discussion about what level of what level regulation do you want to have on ADUs at that point as well.
Well, my next question would be whether a REACH code would apply to ADUs. I mean, it's in a sense part of the CEC, but it would be a local code adoption, right? So would that apply to ADUs or not?
So
We don't know. Maybe
to
the
be honest
answer
with
is
you, I
we
have a
don't
little
know.
pet peeve with the term REACH code because I don't know what it actually means.
Yeah,
An amendment to the California, if the city were to prepare an amendment to the California Energy Code and it were approved by the California Energy Commission, yes, that would apply.
okay.
Maybe that's what people mean by REACH codes, but it's a really fuzzy term.
That's what I understood it to be, that
Yeah.
sort of level.
So the building code would still apply to, at least for now, until the legislature goes back to work. At the moment, it applies to
Okay.
ADUs.
And that would be a long, drawn-out process for us to do. That's my impression, a lot of staff time and effort. And
It's not really that much staff time because it's really hiring consultants or using feasibility studies that other cities have done and making sure that we can demonstrate that in this climate zone, an all-electric new construction is cost-effective, applying the assumptions that the California Energy Commission requires us to apply,
Okay.
which is probably not what actually happens on the street on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Commissioner,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Jeff, 2 weeks ago, or what, last meeting, I was concerned about the sort of Title 24 workarounds that were talked about in some of the material that was presented in that staff report. And now, since what you're saying, I think now, is since this is a part of the planning code and not the building code, you're not very concerned about the Title 24 issues, because I guess they're under the Energy Commission and/or in the building code. I'm not sure how that works. But is that true? Are you not concerned about that? Is that not an issue here now? It seems strange to me.
I think your characterization of a workaround is actually fair to say. We have, under the city's kind of inherent police powers that come from the state constitution, we have a lot of authority in our planning code. We used to. It's slowly the legislation is taken away. I have to get used to saying that. But we have authority to create our own zoning standards, and so we're using that police powers authority. Our authority to change the building code is much more restrictive. And in particular, the energy code is the most restrictive part of it. So cities, and Berkeley has really been, it's been terrific that Berkeley did this, because I was curious to see what the reaction from stakeholders who might be advocating for natural gas appliances, and there are some, or how the state would react to the city of Berkeley. They haven't had any opposition or challenge to their ordinance. So I feel like we're probably on the right track with this. There may be, it's a bigger issue. It's probably politically a bigger issue in Southern California, frankly, because the gas company and the electric company are separate. So with PG&E, they provide both services. So I think they're okay with this change. Southern California, it's different, and so there's, I think, more politics about this down there.
Okay. Another concern I've had all along is the fact that most of the gas appliances that are in our homes are often used during peak hour for cooking, hot water, showering, and space heating, actually. And I'm told that we're 100% carbon-free in our electric supply. But I've never gotten a good answer. I've never been able to reconcile how that can be the case when California is a state and when our grid is not, and when natural gas peaking plants are what we use and all over the state. And then even make that even a little bit more anxious is the fact that we're statewide, we're phasing out nuclear, and that'll probably be replaced by, or some of it anyway, certainly peak hour would be replaced by natural gas. And so if we ban my thinking is on that, and is if we are going to ban natural gas appliances in the home, are we going to benefit anyway? Because the electricity is going to be generated by natural gas that's coming to those appliances when they're being most used.
I understand your question.
That Albany is 100% carbon-free.
Yeah, I understand your question, and I think we're taking kind of a long view with this recommendation to you. You're right. Today, it's right now most of the power we're consuming is probably generated by a natural gas power plant someplace. But the hope is that in the near future, and Lizzie can jump in with the dates of exactly what the state targets are, but the state has adopted targets of carbon-free energy at some point in the lifespan of these new buildings that we're building. And so we're trying to get the building ready for that hopeful evolution in our energy sources. So we're using renewables resources, and we have storage and other methodologies that so in 50 years, which of these buildings will hopefully be standing in 50 years, will be carbon-free.
I noticed in something I read in the staff report and the addendums that Los Angeles has a policy of going this way, no natural gas appliances in 2030, 10 years from now, essentially. And why is that? And why are we rushing forward with this so quickly? And when other cities certainly, and Los Angeles certainly is not, it looks like to me like they're planning ahead on this, and that's their goal.
Yeah.
Why do we rush into it? That's my concern.
I think that's a hard question for me.
Well, I know it's a judgment question on that. But what's going on?
I think different cities pick different things that they want to be leaders on, and my sense is that historically Albany has wanted to be a leader in climate action type of policies, and this is one possibility.
Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Jennings, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a quick question for staff. Excuse me, I understand that there were likely some changes to the text of the draft ordinance based on our discussion at the last meeting, and I was just wondering if you could summarize what some of those changes were.
I'm going to defer that to Lizzie, since she was the one who made the changes to the document.
Okay, thanks.
can try my best. I didn't bring red line edits, but
Right, and that's why I'm asking the question, because we didn't get red line edits either, so I just wanted to try to track kind of what has changed. And it's okay if it's kind of big picture.
so we added in a couple more of the findings, which are the whereas clauses. And then sorry, I'm going based purely on memory. I think there was.
And I'm sorry, on the findings that you added, was there something about health and safety? I think that's something we discussed.
Yeah, under section 2024-190A3, additional language was added addressing the health and welfare of electrical
okay.
and design.
Okay, so in the purpose statement. Okay, thank you.
And also there's one, and I apologize if this is exactly what you just referenced. Those numbers went through on page 1, the last whereas was added since we last spoke,
Okay.
as well as the one before that. And the first full one on page 2. And then, yeah, we changed under purpose, the third, number 3, we added some language there. And then we double checked the definitions. We struck something based on what you said because it was redundant. We tried to remove that redundancy. I forget where we pulled it from. And then add some clarifying language under F3 about what would constitute an exemption. And then we changed the passed and adopted language, section 2 publication and effective date, just to say it'll be effective 30 days after the date of its posting, because originally it said 30 days after the date of its posting or January 1st, 2020. And there was a recommendation to say whichever comes second, but at this point, it will likely just be effective 30 days after the date of its posting. And I can get more specific.
No, that's helpful. I think
That's what I can
That's enough for
remember.
me.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I also just had one final question, and it was in the ordinance relating to the exemptions, the projects that are exempt from design review. What I gathered from Jeff's presentation was that even if hypothetically a project weren't to come to the Planning and Zoning Commission and it was handled at a staff level, if there are objective design standards, those would still be applied, and this would be considered an objective design standard. So if state law took something else out of our discretionary powers, this would still hold as a standard that would be applied?
That's right. Anytime we're allowed to use objective standard, whether it's the commission or us, our intent would be this would be one of those standards.
So it would only be if something was ministerial where, in theory, no design review could be applied, or some sort of language like that would sort of be the only exception to that, and that's
right.
Probably unlikely.
Unless HCD says that's how they're interpreting this new state law about ADUs.
Got it.
And it's not the best written law, maybe.
As of right now, at least, like state density bonus, I know those come to us. Even if those didn't come to us, they would be subject to subjective design standards, SB 35. Okay.
Jeff, another question. Do you have any, and it's just a guesstimate, do you have any idea of a guesstimate of like how many new units we might have in the coming year that would be affected by this? And based on
How many ADUs next year do you expect?
If the pace holds, I would say we'd have another 20 to 25 ADUs next year.
20, 25 units?
Yeah.
And we don't, and possibly some larger projects, but it'd be a dozen or smaller large projects, in other words. Yeah.
It's really hard to predict
Yeah.
the big projects. They don't come on a steady stream. We might have a big project next year, we might not. It's really hard to say.
All right.
Great.
Not a big number, though. Yeah, all right.
That's it for questions, and we'll go ahead and open it up to the public for public comment on this item. Do we have any speaker cards?
I don't have any speaker cards, but I gather there are several people here who would like to address the commission. So if you can fill out a speaker card, they're at the back of the room, and we can call your name and.
But, yeah,
You can, yeah, if we want to just get a few folks to line up by the mic, please go ahead and start. Just please make sure to state your name for the record. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Mathew Goff. I'm here on behalf of the Sierra Club. I speak today in support of this ordinance to ban gas in new construction. I think that there are a variety of benefits that we see from electrifying buildings. I think it's important to start with the health benefits as one of the main reasons to do this. There have been a number of studies done that show that having gas in the home can have negative health outcomes on people. The Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory did a study that showed in a majority of the homes that have gas stoves, when those gas stoves are on, the indoor air quality levels would be illegal if found outdoors. There have been other studies done that show that children who grow up in homes that have gas stoves in them are more likely to develop asthma when compared to children who grow up in homes without those stoves. This is an important ordinance that can protect the health of Albany residents, and so I think that that should be central in this conversation. I think that from an affordability perspective, this also has some benefits to the city of Albany. The statewide codes and standards team, which is made up of regulatory agencies in California and utilities, found that it is cheaper on average to build with all electric appliances. So for single family homes, you're looking at an average of $5,000 per unit, and in multifamily homes, you're looking at a savings of $2,000 per unit. And so in the context of California's housing crisis, this is a solution that we can apply to help address that problem. There are obviously the climate concerns, so natural gas from our buildings is a significant contributor to the climate crisis, and this is a way to address this. I also think one point I wanted to raise in response to something that you said, Commissioner, even when you are looking at heat pumps in the home compared to gas furnaces in the home and a California grid that isn't entirely clean right now, you still end up using less energy and ultimately less greenhouse gases with a heat pump in comparison to a gas furnace because of the efficiency gains. Heat pumps are on average 3 to 5 times more efficient than gas appliances. So right now, and then that's not in considering the leakage that happens across the distribution line of the gas system. So right now, heat pumps are more efficient and cleaner than gas appliances, and as California's grid becomes greener, that will only continue to improve. So I think this is a great ordinance. Albany would definitely not be alone. As we've heard, Berkeley has adopted an ordinance to ban gas. At this point, there are 17 cities in the state of California that have either banned gas or strongly incentivized electrification through local ordinances, and so this is definitely a wave. So support you guys doing this.
Thank you. Next speaker, or do you have?
Kate Ledger.
Yeah, hi, my name is Kate Ledger, and I'm actually chair of the Energy Commission, the Berkeley Energy Commission, and I'm also an architect. I have a green architecture practice in Berkeley for the last 23 years, and I was very involved in the development of the Berkeley gas phase-out ordinance as an energy commissioner. So I wanted to express my support for the Albany all-electric development standards for new construction. I think that's really great you guys are doing this. The materials in your commission package, I think, are really actually very thorough. I looked through them a couple of days ago, and they have a lot of really good information addressing many of the questions that have been raised here. Briefly, just to summarize, all-electric construction does reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As Matt pointed out, the electric heat pumps are 3 to 5 times as efficient as even the most efficient gas equivalent, so they're just using less energy. And then because Albany has the 100% carbon-free as the standard electricity, you are reducing overall your greenhouse gas emissions. And the signaling that Albany sends to the state by purchasing 100% carbon-free energy is to generate more renewable energy and to reduce the amount of energy, gas-powered and nuclear-powered energy that's supplied overall. So it's good to go all electric in that sense, and it does reduce greenhouse gas emissions. All electric construction is cost-effective, saving residents costs up front by not including gas infrastructure and over time, as the cost of gas is expected to go up faster than electricity. As an architect, I've worked on several all-electric projects over the last 10 years, and I have found it to be cost-effective, particularly for new construction. Even 10 years ago, we found the savings from not installing gas infrastructure more than made up for any added costs of going all electric. And this is even more true today as heat pump technologies improve and become more and more commonplace. All electric construction will ensure these new buildings will not have to be replaced when the gas becomes a stranded asset in the future. Building electrification is part of a statewide strategy to meet climate goals. Ultimately, remaining gas infrastructures in building will need to be replaced. Finally, there are the health and safety issues, and Matt talked about them very eloquently in terms of the indoor air quality issues. And then, there's the real very serious potential of explosions and the effects of being very close to the Hayward Fault and having these gas lines potentially rupture. So in conclusion, the proposed gas ban is an excellent idea, and I want to encourage you all to support it tonight. Thank you. And if you want, I've got copies of my comments. I'll give them to you.
Okay, thank you.
The next speaker is Eric Ahrens.
Hi, I'm Eric Ahrens, and I'm in the League of Women Voters, actually, and that's because I can explain technical matters. And the League this year in June, in the state convention, it made global warming a top issue for the League. And so it's an important thing for the League. And the Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville League here, it's a local section, it has made electrification a major thing. And so we're here, and Candace here, to speak in favor of this whole thing. And on the big picture, California now produces more electricity in the middle of the day from solar cells and windmills, wind turbines, than the whole state can use. And so if we electrify, at least in the middle of the day, we're going to be helping things. And storage, battery storage, and hot liquid storage is coming along also. And so one can, in the future, have a total electric system all the time, not using any gas. So that was a big milestone that was passed, that California can produce more electricity in the daytime than it can use, and that's a major milestone. And so if you electrify here, it's going to be another little added help in this whole matter. That's all that I have to say. I'm not going to say any details here, but that's the big picture. And so thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Candace Hyde Wang.
Hi. I'm a member of the Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville League of Women Voters, and I'm also the chair of the Electrification Committee for the State League of Women Voters. I just wanted to encourage you to vote yes on this initiative. It's very important for us to move to electrification in order to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. New York and California have the oldest gas transmission lines in the country. We are leaking methane. Natural gas is methane all the time. We leak it at the wellhead, in the transmission lines, and in our homes.
at the gas meter in your house, 1% leaks every day. That 1% is equivalent to 85 parts of CO2. It's a very, very strong greenhouse gas, and we need to stop transmitting it. To your concern, it's better to burn the gas at an electrification plant and turn it into electricity at a plant than to transmit it underground to our homes. We produce in our homes as much smog as all of the light-duty vehicles in California. That's how bad it is. A child in a house that has a gas stove has a 43% greater chance of developing asthma. So electrification has a lot of benefits. It can give us a clean environment. It's cheaper in new construction, and it's the wave of the future. And I'll just give you a little anecdote. Here I am driving my old gas guzzler, and I think I need to get an electric car. And so I looked around and I looked around, and I know about what the prices of these cars are, and I finally settled on one that's a mini SUV, and I knew what the lease should be, and when I went in, the guy gave me a price that was twice as much as I knew it should be. And I thought, wow, this is way too much. She's cheating me. But then I noticed that all the companies everywhere in the Bay Area had that same $700 a month lease on a $40,000 car, not a $350 lease. What that told me was, this is a car that's in demand. They can charge what they want. I think that same, I'm a realtor, and I've been very concerned about value in housing over time. I think that same thing will happen with housing. People will want to pay a lot more for a good electrified home. That's what I...
Thank you.
The next speaker is Preston Jordan.
Good evening. Thank you for taking up this issue. I encourage you to pass the recommendation on to council tonight of this ordinance, and I want to thank staff who spent some time walking me through various steps and questions, so that was very helpful, and also staff brought this forward. I would ask that one addition be made, which is to the third part of the purposes, which mentions leaking and damaged gas lines. I would ask that that be taken the next step to make the connection to a gas ban decreasing post-earthquake fire risk, just to really draw the connection for people quite clearly. As far as, we've heard about excess availability of clean electricity during the day, and then there's the question, well, what happens at night? That's an area of active technological and industrial development, so I just want to read you a bit from Forbes magazine about a facility that's being contemplated in Utah to essentially take advantage of the excess electricity during the day and do some novel storage approaches. And this is titled "The World's Biggest Energy Storage Project Planned for Utah." Mitsubishi is leading an ambitious project to develop what it claims will be the world's largest energy storage project. The venture will take advantage of salt caverns owned by Magnum Development. Without reading more of it, what they're planning to do is do what's called compressed air energy storage that will use the excess electricity during the day to pressurize air in these salt caverns, and then they'll release that and through turbines and produce electricity back at night. They're also contemplating producing hydrogen during the day and storing that in some of the caverns, which would give them a longer cycle for seasonal type storage, and so they'd be able to produce in low periods during days. They'd be able to burn that back. So, it's not a static environment. Things are changing. And so to the extent that we can really get on the electrification pathway, we'll be able to create the demand for those storage facilities as the grid cleans up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Lucinda Young.
I'm a longtime Albany resident here to express my strong support for this mandate, and I was very excited to see that this is being considered. This is in furtherance of the climate action plan that Albany has put in place. And I think that the climate crisis needs to be the most important issue that our government is considering, especially I think with the federal government rolling back the regulations to avert the climate crisis. It's really important that the state and our local government step in. So I want to strongly urge you to pass this. I also just wanted to address Mr. Donaldson's question about why not follow, or the suggestion that why not follow Los Angeles lead and wait 10 years. The UN Climate Panel last fall issued a report that we have 11 years to turn this around. We don't have 10 years to wait. I think Albany, like Berkeley, needs to take the lead on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last speaker is David Wimmer.
Good evening. I'm also a long-term resident of Albany, and I totally support this ordinance or mandate. I totally agree with the previous speakers and all the technical reasons why to do it, but I also realize that Albany is small and we aren't going to save the planet by ourselves. But I think the best thing we can do is pass this and send a message out to the larger, community, regional, statewide, national, so we can do the most good by leading this effort. And I look forward to the not too distant future, the consideration of having us retrofit our homes to go all electric. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final speakers? All right, with that, public comment is closed on this, and we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Anyone want to start off?
I could start. Sure. This is, I think, the third time we've talked about this, or really the fourth. We had a study session last spring, and I don't feel a strong need to reiterate all of the reasons that everyone else has brought forward to support this ordinance. So I'll just keep it brief and say that I do support the direction that the city is moving in. I think that the climate change related benefits, even though they may be modest given our size, but those benefits, as well as the health and safety benefits and considerations, I think those are each independently enough reason to adopt an ordinance like this. I do encourage staff to keep looking at ways that we can incentivize or potentially in the future consider requiring all electric in remodels and other kinds of projects as well. But I think this is a sensible and modest step and one that does send the right message. Thanks.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm the one, I'm skeptical about going this direction, and I have been at the last meeting, and I reviewed all of the material we had in the staff report, which was pretty voluminous and really interesting. I've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks, and I think I want to thank everyone who submitted the material and staff for putting together that package for that. I don't think I'm changing my position, though, and I just think this is the wrong way to go at this particular time. I am concerned that this adds a new regulatory requirement to housing. When we have a housing crisis, the state is forcefully acting to encourage new housing construction. And I think we should be giving builders more flexibility in how they can approach that very important goal of constructing more housing rather than more requirements, and this adds a requirement that you have to go all electric. So that really bothers me. I really don't think we should be adding new regulations at this time. I'm not sure that this regulation would be all that effective or all that effective in Albany, for Albany. Because we aren't expecting a lot of development. we would get to have some homes that would be all electric. But there is evidence, as I said earlier, that so much of the electric generation that we're talking about here that's now used for gas would occur during the peak periods of the day. And that means we might just be trading the use of natural gas from in the home to a remote location to some extent. I don't know the extent of that, but that trade-off makes me nervous. I just don't think we're ready to do this yet. I think we'd also be adopting a natural gas ban at a time when we all know the reliability of our electrical infrastructure is suddenly in question. And I think that doing that would send the wrong message. We shouldn't, everyone's worried about the electrical infrastructure. It's being shut off for fire things. We've had, 13,000 homes lost a year ago this week because of the problems with the electrical grid that burned down the town of Paradise. And so it seems to me that's just the wrong message to be sending to the world. Well, we're going to get rid of natural gas. We're going to go all electric. That just doesn't feel right to me. And I don't think we should be doing that. I think there's other things we should do. So, and then as a public policy sort of matter here, I think we should be working on incentives and public education. I've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks just learning about this. We had one comment from someone who said, well, I put in an on-demand hot water heater in my house in Albany 4 years ago, and I didn't even know that you could do that with a heat pump and go all electric. And I say I had that same experience just last year. And no one told me that I didn't really know until this process started, that you could go all electric, you could heat water with heat pumps and avoid natural gas altogether. And that's what's part of what's going on here. So what I'm saying is we should be working on public education and developing incentives to go electric, but we shouldn't be banning natural gas. The idea of a ban sends the wrong message. And if we ban natural gas, we might be affecting what we're saying, a few dozen homes in Albany over the next year, 2 years. But what if we did some incentives that would have called for retrofits? We have 5,000 homes in Albany. And if we got a few hundred of those through a program of incentives to adopt electric cars or to put in more solar panels or do more solar work, we would far exceed the benefits for reducing greenhouse gases than this measure would. This measure will get us a lot of publicity, I think, but I don't think it'll be very effective. And I really think that this should go back to our Climate Action Commission, and that we should ask them to come forward with projects in Albany that will really be more effective. And I'm looking at incentives or programs to help us retrofit our homes. On my own block, in fact, we have a meeting this Sunday about there's a lot of homes in my block that have solar panels. And there's a meeting this Sunday coming up about, well, how about batteries? Let's go batteries. Let's do some storage here. Maybe on our block, we're talking about maybe we can get some of our homes off grid when the electric grid goes down. That's the conversation that's going on in my neighborhood right now. And I think we should be encouraging that. And I would really like to see the city of Albany sort of stepping up in those areas where they're going to get some practical things done. I would love to see some education on how to use heat pumps better. I really like the idea of using heat pumps for hot water. And I bet you that in our 5,000 homes, there's probably 100 or 200 water heaters that need to be replaced every year. If Albany were telling people that you should go heat pump, or you should go a hybrid heat pump that I've learned about in the literature we've had here in the last few days, I think we'd get big benefits there. And I would like to go that way. And similarly with furnace retrofits. I spent a lot of money not too many years ago on a super efficient gas furnace, replacing an old gas furnace, which I have to say worked okay. But I wanted to do the right thing, and I thought that was the best thing at the time. And now you're coming to me and you're saying, no, you did the wrong thing. And that's implicit here anyway. You use gas. But I didn't know, and I still don't know whether my furnace could have been replaced with a heat pump, retrofitted with a heat pump, and how much more it would cost and what the payback period would be. I'd like to know that, and I think that our Climate Action Committee in Albany should be working on those things, not just saying we're going to ban natural gas. I think it's too early to say that. We're probably going that way. But I say let's do some other things here. So I'm going to vote no because I really have public policy questions about whether this is the right action to take. So.
Sure. Commissioner Kent?
So I think there's many good things here. The health reason is a big one for me. It's part of a larger future planning effort. I've worked on a lot of buildings that have gone all electric, so it's not new to me. It's been on the horizon for several years. But what you said, Commissioner Donaldson, I think is really important, and this is a piece of many things. So this is an important piece, and maybe a minor piece from all the stuff that you said. I mean, many of us, what we're doing now is putting the burden on residents coming into the city. When I myself, I had my furnace pilot lit all summer, and I didn't use it. I mean, that's because it's such an awkward place to get to, and it's so hard to relight that pilot. And those kind of little practical things are really holding us back. But I'm not going to hold this up because this is another piece of the puzzle. I think this is good, but there's many things that we should also be focusing on. And I think that the city, I think it's a really good idea of kind of educational reach out on ways we who already have gas can pull back and use less of it. I think that's a very big part of it. So I would vote for this, but I think it's only a piece of many things we need to do.
Mr. McLeod, do you have any?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. And first of all, I'd like to really thank the staff for your careful and thoughtful work on all this. I think you put in a lot of hard work, and it shows. So job well done. Thank you. I 100% support this ordinance. I think it's not rushing into it. I think, if anything, it's coming too slow, all this kind of change. The basic premise is that burning natural gas creates global warming, and the release of methane into the atmosphere creates global warming. And for those reasons, we should be eliminating the use of natural gas right there, full stop. Part of this reason we're having this discussion is because of technological change. 10 years ago, the equipment wasn't there really, just becoming available, and it's gotten so much more efficient in 10 years that I'm extremely hopeful for the next 10 years. For example, the heat pumps that you can get now have an energy factor of 3 to 5 compared to gas appliances, which have a maximum of about 95% efficient. 3 to 5 energy factor means it's producing 3 to 5 times more heat and energy than you put into it, which is really quite extraordinary. So the technology is improving. It goes back to our comparison. There was a comparison of natural gas usage of a hot water heater to a heat pump water heater, and basically the idea is that the heat pump water heaters can use a heck of a lot less energy and produce less carbon because they're more efficient. Some of the equipment in Japan is getting up to a factor of 7, so I think the equipment is going to do nothing but improve. I also support this for the health reasons: indoor air quality, fire safety, carbon monoxide safety. The state requires carbon monoxide detectors in every building with gas appliances for a reason, because those gases can kill you. So I'm all for eliminating natural gas. As to Commissioner Donaldson's point about retrofits, I fully support that. I support that 100%, and in fact, that would really be phase 2. looking at that in terms of incentivizing retrofits and fuel switching. And I think it's coming. There are sources. There will be many, many more sources to do that. And I'm sure Albany will be on board with promoting that in the near future. But that's not the question before us tonight. But I think that is coming, and I think that is also a great goal. The other thing is that the next area of improvement is battery storage. There are many types of battery storage systems that are coming online. I learned about one last week, which is winding a spring in basically a big barrel in a vacuum, winds it up all day using renewable electricity, and then it unspins at night, creates electricity, and provides power. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are coming along. I think resilience is really important, and we're going to get to resilience through renewable energy with battery backup. And that's going to happen on the building level, as well as maybe larger storage systems outside outside of our city or somewhere, but it's going to happen at an individual building level, and that's where resilience will occur. And that's where resilience will occur from fire, plant shutoffs, and it's exactly what you're talking about in terms of having power when these other shutoffs are occurring. You're going to have a transfer switch in your home. You're off the grid. Your solar panels will power your battery. You'll use your battery at night, and the next day your solar panels will power your battery again. So you're off the grid, but you're resilient. That's going to be another big step in our energy future. I don't want to go on too much longer, but Carbon Free Albany website has a lot of these things about retrofits, promoting heat pump water heaters, heat pump heaters. All this technology is really improving. The other thing, as we go more electric, the state of California is committed to going to zero greenhouse gas production in our electricity production by 2045, which is very, very soon, relatively speaking, in terms of building and planning. So I think it's time to get natural gas out of our buildings and plan for a future that's carbon-free. So I support this 100%. Thank you.
Thanks, and I'll just wrap things up without totally reiterating what a lot of folks have said here, but I am generally supportive of this ordinance for a handful of reasons. I do think, again, the in-home health as well as safety, particularly safety post-earthquake and the risk of that gas lines pose post-earthquakes, I think any little thing that we can do to minimize that in an incremental way. I do think this is also a pragmatic way, an approach to start with new construction, because it isn't wholesale affecting, all development or remodels or the livability of Albany, but it is taking sort of one piece of the puzzle. It's a piece of the puzzle where people are already investing a very, very large amount of money into, renovating their property. And so I think this is the right place to start. Similarly, I do think, I hear many of the points that you've brought up, Commissioner Donaldson, and I think there are some things about, that are a little nerve-wracking about going all electric, given some of the downed electricity that we've had, especially over the last few months. And I think it's the kind of thing that Albany should continue to, I'm fortunate enough to be on Marin, where our utilities have now been undergrounded. I think it's the kind of thing that, seems to go hand in hand with this effort, that if we were going to move towards sort of an all-electric set of requirements over the years, we should also be focusing on moving our utilities underground so that they do continue to be reliable. Obviously, that is always money, and it's always an issue of priorities and where we spend that. Similarly with incentives, I think the incentives is a great idea. It does come down to money and where, does the city have the funding to be able to afford allocating resources to, homeowners to do this. I personally, from my experience, at least in the construction, working with folks in the construction industry, I don't see this as a terrible deterrent for building housing. That is definitely something that would be a concern to me otherwise. I think our priority, for me at least, I think building additional housing is part of the climate solution, and I don't want us to be deterring housing production. However, just even anecdotally, the home next door to mine used to be a commercial, it's originally a home, but it was a commercial building for many years, and it's undergoing a major remodel right now to bring it back to a single-family home, and they are choosing to go all electric. And a big part of that choice is that they would otherwise have to be trenching and doing some changing with some gas lines to separate sort of old historic, weird, funky gas situation between the properties. But they're choosing to go all electric. And I think that's very telling when this is even a remodel and you're dealing with existing, walls and existing plumbing and all of that, that if you're making the choice to go electric, there's clearly a financial reason, especially if this it appears to be sort of a flip for-profit project. So there's clearly a financial analysis that's gone into the advantages of going all electric rather than gas. Definitely support the ADU exemption. I do also think, given where state law is going with ADUs and the allowance for ADUs to be added in conjunction with new construction, I think inherently, if folks are adding an ADU as part of an otherwise new construction project of the primary home, I think it's very likely that it will be inherently all electric, because the primary house would likely be an electric since it's a new construction. But I wouldn't want to deter somebody from putting in, I think about in my house, if I were to put an ADU in the ground floor of my home, you might start getting to a cost prohibitive situation where if there's existing gas infrastructure, we don't want to deter that. So I understand that exemption there. And lastly, I do think this is also a policy statement, and I think there is a point where policy statements do matter. And I think it's really important, especially for small jurisdictions that often, especially in the current, state political climate, sometimes get the bad rap of not playing ball and advancing, important things like housing and climate and all of that, for us to be making the statement that we're at the table and we're willing to, take the steps that are necessary to help on that. So the one thing that I would ask maybe to staff, and I'll wrap it up with this. I do think this is new, and I think it would be helpful for us to get sort of an annual report, or even if it's just anecdotal in nature, about what are folks, when they come to the counter and they're inquiring about doing new construction, does this appear to be any kind of deterrent for them moving forward? Or are they saying conversely, nope, this is fine, totally get it, makes sense? I mean, I think just hearing a little bit of, especially since we have such a low volume here, if nothing else, that anecdotal feedback over the year, I think would be helpful, especially as we look towards if this migrates into sort of modified ordinances over the year. Lastly, just, I'm in the planning industry in my day job, and ordinances are just that. If for some reason this appears to be catastrophic and doesn't work and has a whole lot of negative consequences, we can bring back a revised ordinance and change things. So none of this is set in stone in perpetuity forever. So I think it's worth taking the risk of giving it a go. That wraps up my comments, and I think we probably have somebody who wants to make a motion here.
I would be happy to make a motion to, what am I recommending, though? Make a motion to recommend to the City Council that they adopt amendments to Chapter 2024 Development Standards, establishing all electric requirements for new buildings.
But the resolution also has to, we included a resolution for adoption. So the resolution, if you adopt the resolution, that will forward the recommendation you've just outlined.
Great. Do I need to modify what I just said?
Yeah, I think just referencing the ordinance number, which I believe is 2019-10.
Dash what?
10.
Dash 10? Oh, okay. So I recommend, or I move that we adopt Resolution 2019-10.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
With that second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
All right, that motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Donaldson dissenting. That moves us on to the next item on our regular agenda. That is item 6-2. This item was also continued from October 23rd, and this is an amendment to Chapter 20.32 signs of the Albany Municipal Code.
Yes. So we're back before you tonight with additional revisions to the draft sign ordinance. Just to refresh your memory, the sign ordinance, which we currently have, was established in 1978 and lacks language on content neutrality, as well as distinctions between commercial and non-commercial signage. As such, we've been advised by our legal counsel to repeal and replace the ordinance with something entirely new. So the ordinance before you this evening reflects a new ordinance that incorporates compliance with federal law and also encourages cohesive signage within the city. Again, there was a Supreme Court decision in 2015. It was a case of Reed v. Town of Gilbert, Arizona, which concluded that local jurisdictions may not create different rules for signage based on content. The ruling effectively requires strict content neutrality and provisions for on-site and off-site signage, as well as commercial and non-commercial distinctions. It does give us the authority to establish objective standards by zoning district. So previously, you looked at this in April with a resolution of intention. We came to you at that time with a partial draft, and then just 2 weeks ago, we brought the first final draft, or comprehensive draft, I should say, at which time the commission provided feedback, and many thanks to Commissioner Jennings. I think we've ultimately got a much better ordinance out of it, something that's a little more concise and provides clarity. And so what we have before you tonight reflects the recommendations from that discussion. Now, I didn't have a red line, unfortunately, but I did within the staff report, starting on page 1, note what we have changed. So we reorganized sections, moving the definitions up to the 3rd section, and reorganizing allowable sign area by zoning district and development standards by signage type so that they flow together. We changed the requirement for businesses which close, they have to have their signage down in 30 days. We included the term parking strip in the definition for city property and public rights-of-way. We eliminated commercial mascot. We had a wordsmith change in a couple of different sections. We eliminated previous section signs allowed without a permit because we identified that it was redundant. We added a preface section to 2032-070, and we eliminated a table in 2032-075. We included an introductory clause in 2032-085. We made that flow change, as I noted earlier, and then we clarified the intent under the master sign program requirements. So those are all of the changes that were incorporated into the document, and I think, as I said before, it really tightened the regulations. It makes it flow more cohesively, and I think it will ultimately be a better tool for us as we review signage for businesses. Additionally, this is part of a general plan policy, which requires that we updated the sign ordinance. It's also part of the City Council's strategic plan. Actually, there was one other change I want to make note of that our city clerk flagged today this afternoon. In the table, under the signage type by zoning district, we will clarify this in the next round, but I did want to note that the in-window sign temporary in our districts, we are going to add after 45-day display period for the purposes of home-based businesses, so that the intent is clear that it's specific for a home occupation.
Okay.
So just to reiterate, in the initial draft, you have purpose, regulations, definitions, evaluation standards, election, non-commercial signage restrictions, message neutrality, the review for authority, sign area requirements both by zoning district and sign type, and then requirements for a master sign program. And this is just a screenshot of what is already contained in the draft. We have not received any correspondence related to this effort. The code is exempt, the amendments are exempt from CEQA. And with that, we've included a draft resolution that would forward a recommendation, should you adopt it, would forward a recommendation to the City Council amending Chapter 2032 signs of the Municipal Code.
Any questions for staff?
No, I don't think there are questions. A couple of comments, that's all.
I had a quick question. Is there any, I didn't see anything, but just to make sure I didn't miss anything, is there anything in here about signage illumination?
Illumination? Oh, okay.
I know we talked about it. I may have to take a quick peruse through here. I think we may have made reference to it for Solano commercial, because I know that was a concern about having a a light that didn't have spillover, I think was the original concern.
There's something about halo lighting.
Is there something in there that I?
There's a definition for illuminated sign.
Definition,
And-
there's something about more retail or.
Yeah, there is, it is here somewhere.
Oh, okay, I see. Sign placement. So I guess I had a question about this a little bit. So I'm now seeing where it references sort of indirect illumination or halo lit on page 11D. So would that be the type of sort of general criteria that if you were to get a permit at the counter for a new sign, that would be one of the things that you would use to analyze it? So if it's principally permitted of a sign type, like let's say it's a wall sign, that would be factored in. And so if somebody came in with like an acrylic direct illuminated cabinet or something like that,
Oh, I see.
then you would say, well, this part of the ordinance requires that, you know, A, it shouldn't be blocking a transom, you need to relocate it. B, it needs to not be this cabinet that's directly illuminated, you need to change. So like that would be part of the staff.
Yes, and I mean, if the commission were interested, we could kind of clarify the intent behind this to make it a little bit clearer that the intent is to get signage, not the cabinet sign that you described, but something that's more appropriately placed and less impactful.
No, I think this makes sense. I think I skimmed over that part, and so I didn't catch that. That answers my question on that.
Where is the section on real estate signs? Who would they be covered under?
I believe we put it under exempt signs. Yeah, signs exempt from permits, so it's page 15, real estate signs, and we just reference it, real estate signs as defined by this chapter.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Chris, were you done?
No, yeah, I am.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if there was a follow-on there. I did have a question just about the intent on the interplay between the non-transferable provision and the legal rights run with the property provision, because they seem to be kind of in tension with one another. So this is section, I'm on page 10, 2032-030. Subsection A says each permit will be for a specific sign of a specific occupant and will not be transferable. And then subsection L says that as to all signs attached to real property, the signage rights, duties, and obligations arising from this chapter run with the property. And then also, of course, there are provisions saying you can change the copy on a sign without getting a permit, which I think is all appropriate. But this non-transferable provision, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what the intent is there.
I think we may need to clarify this. The idea is that, if a business goes from one location to another, they're going to be subject to this process all over again. They can't transfer the existing signage they have at one address
property
to another address.
Okay.
We can make a note that that's clear for businesses which change, property address.
Sure. Or, I mean, it might even be, it might be so simple as to say, like, will not be transferable from one property
to another.
or location to another. Because I think it's like if you have a sign for, Joe's restaurant and Joe goes out of business, but Mary moves into the restaurant, she can change the copy on the sign and it's,
Right.
So it kind of, in that sense, it is transferable.
Right.
Between owners or operators on the same property.
Right, exactly. So, exactly. To your point, you could have transfer the rights within the same property, but if that business physically relocates, that's what's not transferable.
Okay. Thank you.
I did think of a question or a couple of questions I have. So first of all, we don't and we can't regulate bus stop signs, is that right?
I don't think so.
Okay. They're not talked about.
And they're not currently subject to our local regulations. So the signage that you see on the AC Transit stops, that's all handled between AC Transit and Clear Channel Communication.
What?
And Clear Channel Communication.
Oh, okay. Okay. And similarly, on the table, 32090. There's a section on roof signage being allowed and not allowed in SC or SPC. Where are we? And I think there's another provision I saw that billboards would not be allowed. Where are we with respect to the billboards that are on top of the old Montero's building? Those are grandfathered in then, or should we acknowledge those in some way?
I don't know that we have to necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, I to my knowledge, I don't think that they were installed even with any sort of city-issued permits. I think they just went up one day, and there's a long-term lease that the property owner entered into.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that we have a lot of authority in that. We ban current,
I do have some experience with where the city of Hayward wanted to remove a billboard to widen the street, actually, and on top of a auto repair shop. And whew, what a battle that was. Inverse condemnation, lawsuits going, and very, very difficult to do. And the billboard was just grandfathered in, and the sign company really fought it hard. And I think that's what would happen with these, probably,
Yeah, I think the one opportunity that we had to have those go away was when we were working on the digital billboards
Right.
ordinance in 2014.
I really
And
worked
that
hard on that.
had that proceeded forward, we would have there would have been a digital billboard on Cleveland Avenue, and those billboards would have come down as
We
part of
would
that
have gotten rid
agreement.
of these, but if we don't do that, okay, yeah. All right. So billboards, we're saying they're banned.
Yes.
And new ones are banned, and we're not going to allow roof signage then
Right.
on San Pablo. Okay, all right, I'm okay with that. I had a couple other little typos or questions. Yeah, let me go. Megan, this, on page 12, did you have a comment that you wanted the removal after 30 days rather than 90 days? And did we?
I don't recall
You don't
specifically,
recall that?
and I don't know that
thought you did. So.
As I recall from our last discussion, I think the commissioners that were in attendance were in agreement that 30 days was a more appropriate window
was
than
30
than 90.
days.
Okay, it does say 90.
Okay, so
now.
it
Page
says
12?
90.
On page
the top
12?
first line on page 12.
Right there? Oh, I
But
see.
I think in your
Temporary.
staff report or
Yes.
or something I read.
I changed it in one
was
location.
30.
and
I
not
saw
the
it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a problem changing that. I think it was Megan suggested changing that. so,
We can incorporate that.
Yeah, okay, and then on page 2, I think it's a typo here. Under 15015, regulatory scope, the fourth word, this chapter regulates signage. I think it should read signs that are mounted.
Yep. Okay.
And should read signs, and I think, signs are one of the words that are defined, and signage is not in our glossary of definitions, so, anyway, I think it should read signs. That's all I have.
Sorry, I got a text. My dog got attacked by a raccoon, but
Oh.
it's ringing. But back to the focus. I brought up roadside signs because it seems to fall through the cracks, and it can be an issue. In our office in Oakland, next door, it's a high-rise, and there's this constant huge sign, space available. And there's never not space available. It's 25. Never taken. It's just an ugly sign, and it's just distracting aesthetics, and that just bugs me. So I don't know where the line draws. Obviously, when you sell a house, you take this. We can deal with that. But if it's at an apartment building where there's always a changeover, it's just a constant. They get to have a big sign on the building forever. It doesn't seem. Maybe we live with it, and that's the way business has to be done. But it just seems like it's. It's like the people that advertise, sometimes people will advertise they want to hire somebody. They don't really need somebody, but they want to promote their business that way, like they're growing. It's kind of like, I see that a little bit of the real estate industry.
Yeah. I mean, the city also has the authority to regulate time and manner. I don't know how exactly we would enforce that, but that is something that could be considered if you wanted to impose a time restriction on a for-lease sign, for example.
It's a tricky one, because
Yeah.
obviously they have a unit, and you got to prove they have a unit. Well, it's just,
That would be the concern that I would have, is that, you get one space leased, another tenant moves out, and so you're kind of in this cycle.
Are there, to that point, are they just, as drafted right now, entirely exempt from any controls, or?
I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think the intent behind this was more the real estate signs that get popped up on Saturdays and Sundays to advertise open houses.
Sort of
So
the
like
sandwich
A-frames.
board types?
Yeah. But to Commissioner Kent's point, I mean, there is signage, leasing commercial space and that type of thing that does get posted in windows.
So to that point, like, I know at least in San Francisco, there are certain signs that are exempt, for example, like construction banner type signs of, this is being built by X construction company or something like that. Sales signs.
They have to go up, right?
They're not mandated, at least in the planning code, but I do know they're subject to is although they don't have to get a permit, they're still subject to the same size, shape, location requirements. So for example, we recently had this issue where they hung one at the top of a tower. It's over the 100-foot height limit. Signs are still capped at 100 feet. And so they had to bring it down to 100 feet. Even though they don't need a permit for it, they still had to meet those same size, location. So for example, if we don't want the concern of there being maybe a huge roof-mounted sign that's like leasing now on a new building, we could say, well, roof signs are not permitted. In this area, you can have a sign that's this size, shape, location, and that could perhaps be one way that we deal with it, that they're still held to the same parameters, but they just don't need a permit. I don't know, in the residential zoning districts, that might not be reasonable here, given how small of a, sort of.
We have the gateway. I haven't seen signs high up on that, but they have the potential.
They could, right, yeah. But I think that's a valid point, especially in bigger buildings where there's always likely a vacancy.
Right.
Right, so we have, in here already, we have time limits on temporary signs.
Mm-hmm.
No time limit.
Well, I guess, do we think this is a problem in Albany that we need to spend a lot of brain damage trying to address right now?
Maybe we address it when it's a problem, but.
Maybe. I guess I'm struggling with how to even
Yeah, me too.
tackle it.
I don't want to bring up a problem without a solution.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of where I was thinking too, is maybe we get this moving, and if we can percolate on what an appropriate solution could be, if there needs to be a solution, and come back with an amendment at a later date if we have some genius idea of how to solve for that in residential zone districts. But, otherwise, I guess we should at some point in time acknowledge that there's no one here in the public, so there's public comment is officially closed as we finish up deliberations here. All of my suggestions from previous study sessions have been addressed in here, and I think this is a great ordinance that ensures sort of the aesthetic, quality of signage and the importance of a strong aesthetics of signage, especially in the Solano Avenue corridor, which was my primary focus on the first pass. And I think you guys have totally done that. So I would be prepared to support this ordinance as drafted, or with those few little amendments that we've discussed.
Yeah, and I should say that I'm sorry, but I have a couple more just little nits that I'm hoping
Bring it
we
on.
can-
I want to make sure this is.
Thank you for all the work on this, and I think it reads really cohesively now.
Better, definitely.
And so just to go through my minor comments, so on page 12, 2032-040, I think in A, I think we want to say temporary commercial signs may be displayed for up to 30 days, not shall.
Okay, yeah.
And the same goes for 045A.
Great.
I thought, and so I don't feel super strongly about this, so we could take it or leave it, but I thought it was a little confusing to have 045 and 050, so two different sections about non-commercial temporary signs. And I was thinking that perhaps a way to just kind of clarify how these work together would be to say in 045A, time duration, it says they can be displayed for up to 30 days. I thought it might just be an elegant solution to say, provided, however, and then go straight into temporary non-commercial signs shall be allowed to be displayed during the election period, and basically just cut that section A from 050, paste it into 045A, because I think the rest of 050 is just duplicative and can go away. Because I think the only thing we're really changing there is the timing.
And the right-of-way, I think is.
Well, that's here as well. Maybe, unless there's a difference. It's,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not gonna, die on that hill. I thought that just might make it a little clearer how those work together. I also wasn't totally clear on the table 1, because it looks like, from the heading, it doesn't say that it's just talking about during election time, but then the timing that's reflected in the body of this table refers to the election timing. So I thought if there was a single section that talks about temporary non-commercial signs, then this table could, address both of those categories, and it could basically say time period for display would be 30 days, except, during election period, and then say 45 days. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
But you may have intended something different with this, so in any case, maybe we can just clarify.
Yeah, so.
Are there two different types of signs that need to be really separately referred to?
Yeah, the issue, we worked really closely with the city clerk, and she's already getting calls about primary election signage and what's going to be applicable, and that's several months away. And so, and working with her, she really wanted it identified as just a separate a section that could be referred to for when she gets these inquiries. Say, go to this section during election periods, and this is the criteria that you're subject to.
So she could excerpt 050 and say, here's the election sign regulations then? Email it to someone?
She basically, that's the intent, and I think next year, obviously being that it's an election year and there's going to be council seats that are up and school board seats that are up, she wants to be able to hand a section of the code to those candidates that pull papers and say, these are the signage requirements that you're subject to.
Okay, well, so in that case, I still have that comment about the table. It's confusing because it's not clear whether it's intended to apply just during election period or not.
I think what would be helpful is in the header there, the table 1, section 2032-050, at the after manner add during election periods so that it's clearly defined.
Yeah, but I guess it's still, and that's fine. It's like a little weird that we have this relating to one kind of sign and not the other kinds. And maybe it's just because the city clerk thinks she wants something to be able to hand people. But anyway, it seems confusing to me that there's a table that applies to one of those subsections and not the others. The other thing, the last thing, if we are just going to keep this as is in 050, the size limitations section, there was this sentence that does not make any sense to me. This is all temporary non-commercial signage displayed during the election period shall be placed and maintained on any parcel or real property in one ownership. What does that mean?
So we can clarify that, but basically the idea is you're not putting signs on your neighbor's property. Like if you're going to put signs out, they're solely on property in which your name is on the title, or you're the leaseholder of said property.
Okay. Okay. I don't necessarily have a suggestion for how to revise that, but any parcel or real property in one ownership I don't think that makes sense.
Too clunky.
Yeah.
I almost think that sentence could just be deleted because B above, I think, clarifies
right,
that it needs the permission of the owner or occupant.
Yeah, that's right.
And then C is the size, which is about
Yeah.
the 4 square feet.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll strike out that last sentence then. and-
Okay. And then, let me just see, that might be all I had. Okay, yep, I think that's it. Thank you.
How is the, how do you guarantee a sign is removed? The business goes out and they just walk off and they leave the sign up there. Who removes it? I mean, how do we get them to remove it?
We would send a very nice letter. They also have to come in and basically, surrender is too strong a word, but basically, if a business closes, they have to go to the finance department to say, hey, my business is shuttered, I no longer need a business license. That would be the timing at which we would say, well, you have 30 days. And we could do that in conjunction with a business license, even at issuance. Like, should you go out of business, you have 30 days to remove your signage.
And there's no guarantee in here that the city has to keep the view to a sign, like if we planted trees or did some improvements.
I don't think so. I don't think we've
If that's the case,
We've
with
addressed
billboards on state property, you have to cut the tree down. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, I don't think that issue's actually come up before, where, a street tree, for example, blocks the visibility of a business sign.
Actually,
Or-
Pablo is state property.
It is.
It is, yeah.
You're right.
Any other
You know,
comments? Are we ready to?
I'll make a
Motion?
I'll make a little comment. In 2004, when they created the Zoning Code Revision Commission, we didn't address the sign ordinance at that time because everyone was so worried about how difficult and controversial it would be to modify the sign ordinance. And now we have no business people here. We have no one in the audience. We're doing it. I don't think we've had any comments from Chamber of Commerce or Solano Avenue Association or anything like that. So it's very interesting. Times change, I guess.
Not very big changes, really. I mean,
Yeah,
not huge
yeah.
changes.
It's just not a controversial item right now. Good, that's good. Yeah.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll move approval. Let's see, I will move, what do we want to do?
It sounds like we had mentioned a couple suggested amendments of, what is it, page 12M, changing 90 days to 30 days, changing 2 shalls to mays.
Striking the second sentence in 2032-050C. And then adding under Table 1, Section 2032-050 during election periods in that header.
And
then, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say 2032-030, clarifying that the non-transferable provision applies to
that's right.
transferring from one location or property to another.
Yeah, and then in Table 1, 2032-090, footnote 2, just adding as part of a home-based business.
Okay, so I'll move approval of Resolution 2019-11, subject to the modifications and corrections that have just been summarized.
Great. Second?
I'll second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, that motion passes unanimously. That takes us out of action items and on to item 7, new business. We have none. Looks like under announcements, we just have one under 8-1 that the next meeting on November 27th is canceled, and our next meeting will be December 11th.
Yeah.
And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks.
Great.
Okay.
That will be our last meeting of the year.
Last meeting of the calendar year.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because the one after that's.